Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Engineering Politics Podcast. Today I'm going to be talking with Truman of Return to Reason about how we are quickly moving towards an election that might result in the civility dam breaking and flooding the streets with more violence and chaos. We focus less on what will happen on November 3rd, or Election Day, and much more on what will happen on November 4th and the following days, weeks, and months after the election. Both parties are setting up the stage for a post-election fight. Both sides are already claiming the election is going to be illegitimate, and that is not going to end well considering the recent social trends toward violence. We will discuss what we think will happen, if there is a scenario that doesn't end in violent outbreaks, and how we can try to reverse this trend by sending the kids to the kids' table and let the adults hash it out. And we also get to watch Truman drink a half a bottle of whiskey while we're doing it, so we got that. But because this conversation was so long, coming in just over 2 hours, there will be no bonus content at the end, but I would still appreciate you joining and subscribing to the Engineering Politics Locals community. You can go to engineeringpolitics.locals.com and become a member for free, or get the subscriber pass for as little as $2 per month. And you can use promo code EPFREE for a 3-month free trial of the subscriber pass, that's spelled EPFREE, no spaces. And I'll go over more of where you can find me and support this content after the show. Also, make sure to show some support for Truman from Return to Reason. You can find Truman and join his locals community at returntoreason.locals.com. If you like the Engineering Politics Locals community, you will love the Return to Reason Locals community as well, so go check them out. Alright, let the chaos begin. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good to see you again. Kevin and I are here to actually make good on our promise that we gave at the beginning of the last episode that we did, where we said we were going to talk about like the election and election results and stuff. And then we had a really good conversation about a bunch of other things, but that wasn't one of them. So we're back again. Kevin of Engineering Politics is here, and we're actually going to talk about the election. Now, first, I have to ask, I should have asked you this before we got started. Who won the game earlier? Did your Packers win?
Well, yeah, they did. What was it, 43-34? It was a high-scoring game. It was nowhere near that close, but it's always good. Do you guys consider the Chiefs rivals of the Texans?
No.
Who are the Chiefs' rivals?
Historically, I would say so. There's those who are like the Raiders have been considered a rival.
So that's
I think
in division.
Huh?
That's in division, right?
AFC West.
Yeah, that should be in your, because you guys Broncos, so. Raiders.
Yeah, Raiders, we play them twice. So yeah, that's a division game. Whenever Manning played for the Broncos, I felt like the Broncos was a rivalry because they would just destroy us all the time. And so now that I live in Bronco country, I really enjoy watching us just mercilessly crush them every single game, which is pretty great. But yeah, I would say Raiders. I felt like the Seahawks was probably in the running for that for a while, just because they were one who we should win. We had a lot of close games with them. And the Patriots, of course, because we would have close games, are good.
Patriots is everyone's.
What? Well, no one's anymore, but
right. Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, but that would be. Yeah. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I bring that up because the NFC North has been an extremely old division, but it's the Bears, Vikings, Packers. The Lions are there, but they're kind of just there to fill out the fourth team, I guess. Sorry, Lions fans, but it's always good to get a win against the Vikings or Bears. We played the Vikings today. Okay. I actually played some college football on the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota, so I actually played with a bunch of guys who were all Vikings fans, and this was the same year that Brett Favre went to the Vikings from the Packers, or technically from the Jets. But
right.
So I have an avid hatred for the Vikings, more so than even the Bears. So to beat the Vikings, especially in Minnesota, always a good day. So I'm in a really good mood right now. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, no, I believe it. You know, what's funny is that the Vikings are actually a team that, because they're also, kind of in our region, at least a little bit,
West, that.
Yeah.
It's Montana, right? That's it.
Right. No, I meant from Missouri, actually. It's like straight up from Missouri.
Yeah.
And so, I'm like, I like them. But I mean, I was a big Packers fan whenever I was younger. And I still, honestly, I really like Aaron Rodgers a lot. I think he's just a really good dude. And so, like that game that Matt Moore was our backup quarterback. I mean, he played statistically as good as Aaron Rodgers. We lost that game because of a turnover that one of our running backs dropped. Like Matt Moore was not part of that.
That was embarrassing for Packers fans. We're like, oh, wow, we get a matchup against the Chiefs and Mahomes can't play. And then it was a really close game. And I was like, okay, it's a little depressing.
I'm going to continue this. I'm going to pause really fast because I have a cat that's meowing outside the door. And so I'm going to go commit animal abuse. I'll be right back. I'm just kidding.
Don't do it on camera.
All right. That was rough. But
PETA will never be a sponsor of this show.
That's right. That's right. Actually, I love that cat. But she has really long hair. And sometimes she gets like a bunch of crap caked on her butt. It's like she's like the sweetest cat ever, but she'll just smell terrible. And so she smells terrible today. And then she's meowing outside the door. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I love this cat a lot, but really annoying. Anyway, so that's good. That's good that the Green Bay won today. Was it really that high score? It was 43. You guys scored 43 points.
Yeah, Packers just lit it up in the second half, and they're scoring so fast that the defense had to be on the field for so long. That's why the Vikings kind of had a lot of opportunity, but the second half was pretty much a blowout. The Packers knew they're going to win the whole time. So
nice,
good day overall. Although I lost a lot of money betting today, but that's a different story.
Did you really?
Yeah, well, not a lot of money, a relative lot of money, a lot of money relative to the amount of money. Yeah. Oh yeah, everyone.
Did you get that reference?
Russians. Yeah.
Okay, Dirty Work.
Rocky, right?
No, you bet against it's Dirty Work. The Chevy Chase is this doctor, and he like owes a bunch of money because he bet against Rocky in Rocky 3 or whatever. So he like lost a bunch of money. It's an old Norm Macdonald movie. It's like really good.
Oh, really?
But yeah, Chevy Chase.
Judging by the first Rocky, it's not an awful bet.
Well, it's Rocky 3.
I know.
And he's like, hindsight's 20/20, man. Anyway, so that's good to hear. And then also, what whiskey are you drinking?
So today, I believe I've already had this on the show, but it's going to be the Whistle Pig rye whiskey, 10-year aged.
The one that Joe Rogan recommended?
It is the one Joe Rogan recommended because I lived my life through him.
That's right.
We all should.
Got Evan Williams, Kentucky Mash. It's really good. And like I told you earlier, I used it to make a homemade honey whiskey recipe that I will never do again because I'm pretty sure I got type 2 diabetes from like 2 glasses of it. It's good, but it's just way too sweet for me.
Good to get it out now. That's good.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so last time we had a really good conversation. I felt like, I'm sure you felt like, and we're very unbiased, and that, in our opinion, is 100% of us here feel like it's a good conversation. So that's good. But this time, we had talked about, and we laid the groundwork, I think, last time. But we had talked about, there's so much emphasis. I had this first thought. Really, it wasn't that long ago. It was like a live or a Zoom thing with a bunch of people in another locals community. And one of them was like, oh my gosh, like we just have to get through the next few months. And they were all sort of having this conversation about just getting through the next few months until the election. And I finally said, I don't know what like delusion, like I would love to be naive enough to think that like after the election's over, it's going to be like sunshine, rainbows, things are going to be good. I'm like, I don't know what planet you're living on if you think that's the case. And I would say that's probably what really kickstarted my thinking of, okay, what happens after the election? And we've talked about this before, and other people have talked about it of, what happens after the election. And so that was something that, I don't know, we felt like we should do a whole episode on of, it's not about November 3rd's election day, but November 4th, maybe, is when we get the results, right? Like, how did you put it? I mean, let me ask you this. Do you think we'll even have the results on November 4th? Like, let's go there first and lay the groundwork for why what comes after the 3rd is so important.
Judging by what the experts are saying, it seems like it's not super likely, which to me is crazy. Like I said to you yesterday, and we were kind of having the pre-conversation to this video, there was a Axios interviewed Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, asking what's Facebook's plan, because Facebook is this bastion of right-wing conservatism. Because I mean, it's kind of, Facebook is like the Fox News, I guess, of social media, where they're not extremely left, so they seem extremely right.
Yep.
You know, they give a little bit more to the right, although you cannot consider them left whatsoever. But Zuckerberg and all the robotic person that he is, he at least kind of tries to play it a bit more fair and down the middle. But, you know, he said, you know, the plans are, since, you know, he openly said it's probably not going to be decided November 3rd. So our plans are between November 3rd and possibly January, he called out, that what we're going to do is we're going to, every single person that posts saying, oh, the election's over, this person won, they're going to add what they call context to the post. It's kind of like a fact check, where they're going to say, no, the election is not over. Here is where the standings are as of right now, which to me, like, as a Facebook strategy, didn't seem the worst thing. Although their picks on fact checkers are not always great. I think they use the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is just a leftist.
Is that true? That they use?
Yeah, that's an approved fact checker, I'm pretty sure, for Facebook. So
let's verify that, because if that's true, that is just.
We're gonna have them fact check this right now. So I'm sure they'll get back to us and call us both racist. But yeah, the point is, it's like these people are gearing up for it, and he called it like the thing that they want to put as a headline when they say, why is the election not over? It's November 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, TBD, is don't worry, this is normal. Like, he called it normal. And in what way is this normal? Like, have we, I'm curious now in history, I'm not a history buff. Have we ever had an election mostly decided like way after? I know we had like in 2000 with Bush and Gore, that I think it may have taken an extra day or two, or some recounting, stuff like that. I remember I was pretty young during that time, but you know, it was never planned out this way. Like, we didn't have a plan to get it finished a week later. And so there's been a lot of people talking about this, that both sides are setting up the narrative already, like before anything happens, is kind of what what Trump did in 2016. He openly said, I'm not going to accept the results in some kind of way. And then, lucky for him, he was the winner, and he never had to tackle that when it came that far. But ironically, the other side decided to not accept the results of the election.
Yep.
And they spent 4 years trying to undermine it. And now we have both sides setting up a narrative to say it's illegitimate. And so, you know, if Trump wins, it's going to be some sort of keeping down black people narrative that we've heard for a long time. The Russians helped them, but they won't talk about the Iranians or the Chinese. And, you know, even the right saying, like, if Trump wins on November 3rd, it looks like the winner on November 3rd, and a week later Biden ends up winning, like, what's going to happen? I mean, that's what we're going to be talking about today. What is going to happen? How is this already divisive country going to tear itself apart even further? And, you know, I've watched people like, I like Steven Crowder's show, and all of them on there are like kind of nonchalant about it. It's like, oh yeah, they'll do a couple of rallies and it'll fizzle out. And I'm like, am I not optimistic? Am I just super pessimistic? Are you and I just on a different, like, are we the crazy people now? Are we the conspiracy theorists? Or are we being like, no, I've seen the trends so far. There's a difference between 2016 and 2020. Like, we've seen ramped up rhetoric and words and marching turn into violence and fire.
Yep.
And, you know, in what world does it seem like we're going to end up breaking this off peacefully? Especially, you know, we're probably going to talk about scenarios later, but, you know, if someone wins, say Trump or Biden shows up as a winner November 3rd, and then a week later, the opposite person ends up winning. Like, if that happens, in what reality is this going to not end up burning down a few cities?
Yep.
We burned it down. We burned them down for less. Let me keep it there. We burned them down for less. Like, you know, are we crazy, or are our suspicions valid?
Both. But what I've learned is that the people who are crazy right now are actually the only ones making any sense. So before we get to the specific scenarios of this person wins, and then this is what happens with the Senate and stuff like that, you know, one of the things that was super interesting whenever we talked on Saturday, I think it was, is at one point you pointed out that, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but also pretty serious, that I think you said we've been talking for about an hour and all of our assumptions are that there's going to be violence. We're just assuming this. And I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Well, even further than that, we were discussing like military strategies of each side.
That's right.
Like, we got in deep. Like, it wasn't talking about someone's going to burn down another grocery store or just burn a place down. We were talking about what military strategies.
Yeah, conventional warfare versus unconventional warfare. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's a good point. And then the thing that I wrote down before we started here is, just for anyone who's watching this and for us, like the reason why that's an important point is because which scenarios aren't, right? Which scenarios aren't violent? So if you make a flow chart of all the different outcomes and possible scenarios, which ones end like with a peaceful transition of power or a peaceful, civilian response? It's like in Avengers Infinity War, Doctor Strange, I looked at 10,000 different scenarios. How many scenarios do we win? One. That's what I think in my mind, but I don't even know what the one is of where it happens, not just on a peaceful transition of power, but I'm saying like the civilian response is we generally accept it. And so, for anyone listening, if you're like us and you close your eyes and you think, yeah, I don't know what scenario doesn't have people dying as a direct result of the outcome of the election. That's a really big problem. And that's why it seems naive and short-sighted. Of course, it makes sense to talk about things leading up to the election. I mean, I think that was most of what the video that I last made was about things leading up to the election. So, I mean, that's fine, but we can't lose sight of time is linear and it will continue after the election. And so that's why that seems important, is because it seems I'm yet to talk to someone who it's not axiomatic that there's going to be violence and again, death as a specific result of how the election turns out. So with that being said, before we get to the scenarios and, there are some of the possibilities, and of course this isn't exhaustive, we kind of talked about it on Saturday a little bit, off the cuff, and that's kind of how we do anyway. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about, unless there's something you wanted to add to that last part about the kind of the various players and who we see as being the relevant players in the game, so to speak, whenever it comes to the response. Is there anything?
Let's keep going.
Okay. Who do you see as like the relevant? So when we say there's going to be violence, okay, that's an act, but there's going to be parties involved, not political parties, but groups. So who are the people that you think will be activated in a way as a result? So let's not even talk about the who wins part, right? No matter who wins, there's going to be one side that's more likely to respond to the side that loses. Does that make sense? And there's a losing side. There's a group within the losing side that's going to be more likely to respond and then be met by those who are activated from the winning contingent. So I think that's an important part to kind of suss out a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense, if I'm articulating that very well. But who do you see as kind of the pieces on the board?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to obviously rely a little bit on who wins and loses, but as a scenario, if someone were to give me a news clipping from the future of November 4th, and it said Biden wins, Portland burns down, that wouldn't surprise me, just right. Because there is one side who's established. It's like their MO. It's like, the election happened, burn it down. Something, some guy killed himself, we're going to blame the cops and burn it down. It's like, it's kind of like an automatic response.
Did you try burning the building down?
Yeah. And so those players are well known. I mean, we've seen them. But the players are broader than that, really. Like I was going to bring up, think of any movies that have some sort of rebellion force against the government in power. Like what dynamics are in play in those movies? It's normally like guerrilla warfare. People are really underfunded. They're really using these resources to figure out how to fight against the man. But that's not reflecting of reality today. One of the big things that happens in those movies is you'll see education is run by the state, which is, I mean, kind of what we have now, which is part of the problem, I'd say. And the media is run by the state. We don't have that now. And normally that's a good thing, right? We don't want state-run media. But like, who's running the media? It's not for the people. Reporting's not really high on their list of objectives to do, like honest reporting. It's corporation-owned media. It's media who wants to forward their own narrative. So the media is one of the pieces on the board, unfortunately. And either way, no matter what happens, it's going to be this amazing victory for humanity, or we have 4 more years of death and destruction and white supremacy and all these awful things, where, again, in your typical movie, it's like, well, they're only going to fight for the state because the state has all the power. Well, here, the state almost has none of the power, at least the federal government wise. And the people who control the narrative are the ones with the power.
Yep.
So when you think about pieces on the board, yes, you have Antifa. Yes, you have BLM. Yes, you have the more radical socialists or anyone who's going to be radicalized against what they see as fascism, basically, because it's branded by the media. But you have the media itself, who's going to be able to go out there, forward a narrative, and be able to kind of shift the narrative in whichever way they please. And we know what direction they're going to go. Again, amazing victory or former years of a Nazi. And we got to consider that, no matter what the outcomes are. I mean, really, it's going to be like the winning World War II if Biden gets elected, which is going to be kind of disgusting in a lot of ways. But, you're not going to see honest reporting, is my point. And then the other side, this is very, very dependent on who wins. And maybe even a little bit if Trump would win. But you have the mega crowd who is posting themselves in mega hats and holding up their assault rifles, right? It's the people who kind of show up in force, but they're kind of conservative in their manner. It's like, I'm going to stay at home as long as the government's not hurting me. I'm going to stay here. But once they start stepping in my door, we have a problem. And those are people that, I don't know if concern is the right word, but imagine what happens when you take their vote away. Like, historically, we really haven't seen this right-wing uprising in America. It really hasn't happened. But how many times are you going to poke the bear before the bear wakes up? And the only thing scarier than a bear is a bear with an AR-15. Like, these people are just this pent-up aggression because they see the system's not working for them. A lot of these people, no matter which way the election swings, I voted for Biden, Trump gets elected, I think the system's broken, I'm going to go on with my life, or vice versa, right? You have a segment of people who are like, okay, you tried to impeach him, you tried to invalidate him from before he even was in office. After he got elected, between then and January, you're already saying how this guy's a Nazi and now legitimate president, and you're doing all these things to delegitimize him, and then in the end, especially if you see him elected, right, the so-called winner on November 3rd, and then November 6th. The other guy wins. Like, how are they going to feel? It's like you legitimately took my voice away. And as an American, I have a duty to fight against a government that is tyrannical. And to a lot of these people, that is tyranny. So you have the potential of activating a very, very large group that, we've talked about before, the tactics there. They're heavily armed. A lot of them ex-military, so they're trained. And I hope to God it would never come down to this. But again, how many times are you going to poke that bear before the bear bites back? And I think that can be a very important piece on the board. And I don't know what direction they go. I don't know if they'd be more aggressive and start going out in the streets and attacking people. I don't see that happening, but they're going to see this as an aggression toward them. And especially if you see protesters coming out in the streets, they're going to start doing what we've seen before and start to patrol the streets because they know the police aren't allowed to. So that's my concern, the pieces on the board when it comes to after November 3rd.
So let's put a pin right there because I think we skipped over one part that's kind of important, which is, and I wrote a bunch of notes down based on what you said, but one of the things we talked about, and I completely passed it, so this is my bad, but it would be, I know. And I think the reason why we passed it is because it seems obvious. It seems obvious in anyone. It'll seem obvious for anyone who thinks about it for more than 5 seconds. But I think teasing it out is pretty important, which is one of the things we talked about is, okay, we have an assumption there's going to be violence, but we do need to discuss what feeds that assumption. What is the groundwork that's been laid that's going to lead to people feeling like it's not legitimate? It's going to lead to there being violence for people to respond, whichever pieces do that are activated, like you said. Why would they do that? So let's do that first. And I have I put a pin right there because there's an important piece of what you said that is a really good transition. But let's talk about what feeds these assumptions in the first place. Why is it so natural for us to say, okay, let's think about all of the ways in which people are going to die after the election? Like, it's just that, like, that's the normal part, right? That's Mark Zuckerberg. This is normal. Like, it feels normal to talk about it like that because it seems so obvious that will be the case. But let's tease that out a little bit of why that will be the case. So the way I see it, I mentioned this in a video in February. I mentioned my last one, but for a while, I thought that the right and the left were not going to perceive the results in November being legitimate. And for me, originally, it was impeachment. I thought impeachment was going to poison the well of the results on the election. But now it's the case where if you're on the right, you're going to feel like it was stolen from you because of the voter or the mail stuff through the mail. And I watched Trump's rally in wherever the hell train yard, Nevada last night. And, he was very clear. The only way we lose is if they steal it. And he listed off a bunch of stats about ballots that were mailed out. And he talked about, like, he said he doesn't like to use the word absentee ballot because people know what that means. He uses the word solicited versus unsolicited ballot. And he was clear to say, if you request a ballot, then that's fine and that makes sense and you should get a ballot. But what's happening is that the governors in a lot of these states, these blue states, are sending out unsolicited ballots. And he made claims about millions of them. I don't know if those are true or not. I don't know if those claims are right. And that's part of the problem. Like I told you on Saturday, I just assume everyone is a little bit lying. But either way, and he said the only way so he took a point that's, I think that's a valid concern, unsolicited ballots and people going out and harvesting ballots and stuff like that. Okay, I get that. But to then follow up the concern with the only way we lose is if they steal it and rig the election. That is the only way we lose. Man, that is a real dangerous, truth claim to make. So he's making a truth claim to all of his supporters. Okay, guys, just so you know, if we lose, it's because these people stole the election from us. And also by these people, I mean the radical socialists who want to take your guns and enslave you and take all your freedoms away. So it's not like the election was rigged by a decent group of people who just wanted to be in power. Also, I've painted them as an existential threat to your life and your freedoms and all this other stuff. And the only way we lose is if they stole it from me and from us. They stole it from us. Now, one thing he did say is if it turns out that the results come back and we lose, he said, we'll go through the courts. We'll go through the courts, which was funny because on Scott Adams's podcast that morning, he said, which side is saying that the way the president will be removed is through the military? Which side's even talking about the military? The left is talking about the military. He said, so if Trump is smart, he'll say, I'm going to use the courts. And it's funny that he said, if we lose, we're going to go through the courts and the courts will, will prevail through the courts. So that was kind of funny. But either way, that doesn't undo how dangerous that rhetoric is. And like you said, the left didn't accept the results in 2016. They've been doing this stuff with Stacey Abrams and talking about they've been planting the seeds of voter suppression and purging voter rolls and getting rid of the black vote and all this stuff with redistricting and gerrymandering, which is a problem, by the way, but that's more of a congressional issue. But either, abolish the Electoral College. And also, it's worth noting, they're going into this pretty pissed that they lost the popular vote in 2016. So they already have what I would say, if you don't have a really good understanding of why the Electoral College is important, that I can see why you would look at losing the popular vote and winning the election as a dangerous thing and as feeling robbed. So I get that. So there's a lot of people that will have a legitimate feeling that if they lose on the left, that it was stolen from them. He's removing mailboxes and all this other stuff. And that's without even getting into what the response will be from the House Intelligence Committee or whatever, and Adam Schiff to do some new investigation to try and impeach Trump or whatever if he wins. And and the media will absolutely, it'll be all over the place. It'll be that the right stole the election if Trump wins. And so that's the way I see it, is that both sides won't just have won't just claim that they lost or that it was stolen from them, but will actually have really good reason to believe that it was stolen from them. And like I mentioned in our conversation on Saturday, it's one thing to have a general belief about something. It's another thing to have a conviction. Conviction is belief that you act upon. And I think that the groundwork has been laid for people that won't just have a general sense of, man, it really kind of feels like, we were cheated there. Sometimes you'll watch a football game and you'll go, man, those refs were the worst refs I've ever seen. I really feel like we were cheated by these refs. You don't ever act on that, right? Unless you're a crazy person. A conviction is a belief you act upon. And I think that the groundwork has been laid that people will not just kind of have a general sense they were robbed, but they will have a conviction that they were robbed, and they will therefore act on that conviction because each side will have a mountain of evidence of their own to point to for why they were cheated. So they're going to be totally justified in whatever action they take because both sides are an existential threat to my team and they stole it from us. And I have all this evidence to support that. So that's the way I see it, as kind of what feeds these assumptions of violence. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Now, as the very, very unbiased conservative I am, I do think the winning the popular vote but losing the election is not a very valid, if you know anything about federalism. That's
that's what I'm saying.
Why
if you understand
that
it,
way. But I do think it's a good point, is you're willing to sidestep the founding of the country and the systems we use to make sure we don't have mob rule in order to make your point and make the individual feel like, why my vote doesn't matter. We all voted. This dude won the popularity contest. Why is he not in the big house? So like there is the gut feeling, the actual individual seeing their vote being worthless, that does compel the human condition to actually say, okay, I've been cheated. I'm no longer heard. Right.
So real fast, it's also a very sticky idea. So what they did in 2016 was they said a student council election is more fair than our presidential election. They said, imagine a student council president. One person gets 48 votes and another person gets, 41 votes, and the person with 41 votes wins. That would never happen. So why are that's a really basic, rudimentary, misleading, example, but it's very sticky because all a person hears is, because it's factually true. It's factually true to say a student council election seems more simple and more fair than our presidential election, as you pointed out, if you don't understand federalism. So like all the other ideas put forward by the left, not all of them, but most of them, it's very sticky. It hits you in the feels, and it's an incredibly effective argument. And again, it's one that's been circulated for the past 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, everything you brought up is a great way to activate a base. I mean, like I've mentioned before, there's a base already there of people willing to physically do something as a reaction to the election. But the question really is, how would that base grow? Who else would be activated other than the known actors in here? Who's going to be added to the piece on the table, right? So I mean, to your point, and especially the conviction thing, it's like if you feel like you are called to do something rather than, okay, I got cheated, whatever, this is how the system is. That's typically,
you win some, you lose some.
Exactly. And that's more of the, I mean, by definition, the conservative mentality. That's why we get a lot less concerned, the people who understand conservatism, not the people just listening to NPR and thinking these conservatives are just ready to go to battle.
I love that you said NPR there. It's good.
Yeah,
Keep doing it. Keep using NPR.
Yeah. Well, they're super reputable, so that's why I use them. But you know, it's the conservative mentality that keeps conservatives out of politics. So they choose not to be. They choose to be adults and make money. But that's also what leads them to not being activated in something like this, or to be physically activated, which is a good thing. I mean, we're adults. We shouldn't fight with our fists. You fight with your words. You fight with your ideas. And that's what we're missing here. And kind of like how we talked about during our discussions, you know, we kind of both have our ways to say, if you're not going to talk like an adult, go over here because you're not helping the conversation. You know, the way I always say it is like, you know, if I'm in a discussion on Facebook locals, wherever it is, and someone butts in with something ridiculous and silly and character attacks, I just say, hey, go to the kids table. You play there with your finger paints. And when you're ready to talk like an adult, come back to the adult table. But right now you're not helping at all. So let's focus on the ideas part of it. And we're seeing, you know, an activated group activating the kids table and saying, you must be outraged. Don't worry about federalism or the systems that make sure we don't devolve into mob rule to protect our union. And it's again, the help of the media that activates that segment of the people, but we don't know what it looks like activating the other direction. We don't know what it looks like when the guy with the MAGA hat comes out. What is he going to do? Is he going to attack someone, or is he going to show force, do what they did in Michigan for the COVID stuff and the lockdowns, where they go there, they're armed, but they have no real intention in using those arms. It was more of a visual, which was a powerful visual, but again, who controls the narrative when you get to the visual? It's always the media. So they had an uphill battle, but apparently they all spread COVID, but the people carrying the BLM signs don't spread COVID. So now we can see kind of how these narratives can change just by omitting certain things and saying, you know, not even like no one even mentions anything about masks when you're in these large gatherings protesting for the right thing. But when you're protesting for the wrong thing, why aren't you social distancing? Why aren't you wearing masks? And it's going to come out the same way. You know, especially if they come out the same way and they start protesting at the capitals to be like, all you people are just spreading COVID. You should be inside. And you can see the governors use that to their advantage. And that's how they're going to be able to shut that down. So, you know, one, how do you activate them? And two, what can they do? Like, where are they going to be able to go? And we've already seen trends from the other side, but we don't know the right wing, I guess, reaction to that.
So here's a transition for you. So we've laid the groundwork for, here's a transition. I'm going to sit here quietly for a minute. But anyway, we've laid the groundwork for why those assumptions exist, because both sides are going to feel justified in claiming they were robbed. And again, the president saying the only reason we would lose is if it was stolen from us, like the media sucks, all this other, yes, it sucks. That's the president saying that. Man, you can't do that. It's irresponsible. It's so irresponsible. And like you said, we don't know what it'll look like for them to be activated. Now, to remove the pin, you were talking about how much can that bear get poked before it bites. And you were talking about the right-wing response before we went back to lay some groundwork. So to remove that pin and resume there, one thought I had was, when it comes to the conservative response, I have a few. One is the bear poking metaphor is actually appropriate to what I think will be by and large the biggest response, which is the only way a bear can bite you and the only way you can poke a bear is if you're in close proximity. You cannot poke a bear unless it's right in front of you. And by that measure, I think that even though the conservatives that feel like they were robbed of the election will probably do the thing. I think what I mentioned on Saturday was there was that guy, Cliven Bundy, was that in like Idaho or Montana or something like that, where there was that standoff at the ranch with the FBI because he was, was letting his cows, his cows used to be able to graze in a place, and then so they couldn't. anyway, whatever you think about that situation, I don't even care. My point is that I think that there'll be a lot of people on the right who say, okay, the crazies are in power, and I'm going to make sure my guns are cleaned. I'm going to make sure that everything's in good working order, because if you come and encroach on me and poke, my first response is going to be to bite. My first response is going to be to bite. So I think that there will be that contingent. And the other part of it is that just on a practical level, conservatives tend to live in rural areas, and so you're not going to even be able to have a real organized coalescence in any practical fashion. So, like, I don't see a real practical Civil War-like scenario unless it is like really, really obvious and convincing that the election is stolen, and whichever side does it gets away with it. And so, I think that, like I mentioned before, Eric Hoffer on The True Believer on Mass Movements. It's a really good book, but he talks about, those fighting to preserve the status quo and those fighting to, for revolution and for utopia to tear down the status quo. And on a practical level, those who, and Hoffer, I think, rightly points out that those who are benefiting from the status quo don't fight very hard to protect it, because the status quo, you could also use the word reality there. And reality sucks. Reality is mortgage payments. Reality is the fact that my back hurts. Reality is, if I don't get my allergy medicine, I have you know what I'm saying? And so, like, reality is difficult, and you're never going to fight as hard for reality as someone who doesn't feel like they're benefiting from reality will fight for utopia. And so I think the other aspect is that very rarely do you see conservatives, I use that term, loosely here, but you see those on the right, the conservative right, fighting for utopia. They just want to be left alone generally. And part of conservatism definitionally is trying to preserve most of the status quo. You're trying to conserve it. And so because they're benefiting from the status quo, or at least they by and large, this is a very loose framework here, but they're going to just live their lives. They're not going to fight as hard, I don't think, for it as someone on the left would for utopia in that scenario. The other part, I think that to your point, I think there is a group who kind of meets that criteria of, they want purpose. They want to feel like they, I think there is a group, let me put it this way. There's a group on the left that feels like they're cosplaying against a fascist, authoritarian government, right? Who's, and they feel like they're in some type of French Revolution type of thing, and they're LARPing every day on the streets of Portland. There's absolutely a group on the right that I think is primed to be activated to feel like they are fighting against a communist revolution of their country, that if these people take power, they will take our guns away. That's something that Trump said at the rally last night, talked about how they're going to take, if I lose, they're going to get the Supreme Court and they will take away your guns, And so I think there's a contingent on the right that has a similar kind of heightened sense of who the enemy is, and will be activated along those same kind of lines. I brought up to you before in the movie Fight Club, Brad Pitt, Tyler Durden points out in one of his monologues, our generation doesn't have a great war. We didn't have any, these kind of rites of passage. And so you have all these men that, every generation before them had, rites of passage and wars and stuff where they were able to prove that they're men. And this generation doesn't have that. And so I think that there, in some sense, that has left a little bit of a hole, a void for meaning for a certain demographic of men on the left and right. And so I think there are people on the right and left who will feel that and will answer the call and feel like, this is my moment, right? This is my time to shine, my time to go and fight in my great war, right? And the groundwork has already been laid for that on the right with, okay, Kyle Rittenhouse, if you get on Facebook, on any conservative Facebook, Republican Facebook, it is all these memes, and it's the guys who got shot. And it's like, a picture where it's like, this is the second place winner of the, Kenosha quick draw competition 2020. And it's all these things lionizing Kyle Rittenhouse. And my point is, no matter how you feel about Kyle Rittenhouse, my thought is that it was a justified shoot, period. End of story. It is too far to go and say he's a hero, because it's the same thing when what happens whenever you discuss people who commit mass shootings. I'm not comparing Kyle Rittenhouse to a mass shooter. I'm talking about a phenomenon. It's that you lionize something and people go, oh, I want grandeur. I want recognition. I want to be seen. I don't have purpose. I could go and do that. And so you have a subset of psychopaths that emulate the actions of mass shooters because they want that. So I'm not saying this is psychopaths necessarily. I'm not comparing Kyle Rittenhouse to a mass shooter. My point is that he has been lionized in a fashion that there will be people that look at the way he's been treated on social media and will envy that treatment and therefore want it for themselves. I am fascinated by the fact that we did not see an uptick in violence after that Trump supporter was shot in Portland. That is a phenomenon or at least right now, a phenomenon well worthy of study, because I saw that and I go, this is it. We're at the next level. We're at the end game now, because that is going to activate a bunch of dudes, and it's been crickets. I am really fascinated by that. But that doesn't mean that with the right motivation, i.e. the election is stolen from me, that you won't have a whole other group of people that go, well, Kyle Rittenhouse was a hero. I remember that guy, and he killed these two people, again, in self-defense, and want to, feel like, oh, I could get some sense of meaning by going and putting myself in harm's way and having my own rite of passage and proving I'm a patriot or whatever. So yeah, that's, picking up based on what you said earlier, you're saying we don't know what it'll look like. We don't know what it'll look like. I think we have a few templates we can look at. I think we can look at Rittenhouse. I think we can look at the Clive and Bundy thing. And I think we can just look at historically how people who operated under that ideology functions. And it's usually, like you said, poke a bear. We have to be right next to a bear in order to poke it. And so I think there's something to be said for that. A lot of times conservatives will just live their life. But I think this time it'll be, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to shoot first and ask questions later if you come and F with me, because I'm not going to perceive you as legitimate if you show up at my door. But that's how I see the right response.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I can say, as the resident conservative here, the kind of the, I guess, psychology behind, I'm not going to go out there and actively go out to hunt people. Kyle Rittenhouse, that's the way they're trying to spin it, but it's pretty obvious that wasn't the case. No matter what they find, what evidence they find, or whatever charges they try to trip up on him, it's pretty clear the dude wasn't out there hunting. But that's the way they try to spin it. And the other side, you do, the guy shot in Portland, it almost does seem like someone was just going after him specifically for his ideology, his ideas. Yep. But as a conservative, it comes with a bit of, I guess, naivete. Is that how you say that word? Yeah. When
nine tails.
As a conservative, it's like, I don't care what the federal government does. Like to me, people always complain about the division in our politics and how they can't get anything done ever. And to me, I'm the conservative standing here. I'm like, hey, every day they don't get something done is a great day to me. This is supposed to be inefficient by design.
Yep.
And here's the big thing. If the government hasn't grown exponentially like it has, a presidential election can be stolen from my guy and I don't care.
Yep.
And that's the conservative mentality. I don't care. I know this power corrupts people, but the power is not big enough to affect my life when it gets into my life. And for me, like the big one for me is when it gets into my kids' education and when you start to indoctrinate my children, that's when it gets to me. That is you telling my cows they can't graze in a certain spot.
It's a wrestling match where the winner gets a BB gun. You don't really care about that.
Right. Yeah.
The government's small.
Right. So but it's that precondition there that they're supposed to be small. They're too big now. And now it's a problem. How many of those people are going to see it that way? I don't know. But what you're doing now is you're analyzing past social trends to see what are we going to see November 4th. And you're right on the conservative side. It's amazing how someone looks like they're basically executed in the streets of Portland for not believing in what the anti-fascists believe, because apparently the person must have been fascist or something, right? And there was no real, at least violent response to that. I mean, there's a lot of people pointing at it and saying, we shouldn't be okay with this. And it seems like the media is kind of not really covering it at all, or they're trying to spin it being like, well, what did this guy do in order to get shot? But when it came to Kyle Rittenhouse, it didn't matter what the other people did. The dude's trying to smash a guy with a skateboard. That's irrelevant, right? So, they're spinning it that way, and there really wasn't a response to it. But we see this from past social trends. Like you said, you got to be right next to the bear to poke the bear. If it's away from me and it's like, okay, I'm not going to go into Portland, whatever. It's like, that's not part of my life. Not a lot of conservatives live in Portland. If it was, transplant that somewhere else in Texas, the response may have been different, but maybe you wouldn't even gotten that far. Right.
Dallas.
Right. Well, I mean, some places in Texas, I forget the cities that are liberal and the ones that are still relatively right, but
Dallas and Austin are pretty left.
Yeah. But my point here is, if it was in a right wing city or town, I guess, or village or whatever, normally you don't have too many right wing cities, right? The response would have been different, I think. But when analyzing past social trends, kind of like what I said before, what was the response in 2016? 2016, there were 100,000 people marches all over the United States. You had the Women's March. You had, I think, a couple other ones, maybe the LGBTQ marches, or, there were several marches in a row. I mean, you had them all over the United States, and it was a big show of force. And they were really, really peaceful. Instead of being mostly peaceful, they were just peaceful. And
they were the actual definition of peaceful.
Right. And this is exactly what you want to do. I certainly don't agree with what they're marching with, but as long as you're doing it peacefully, I don't care. But you see the social trend moving from peaceful and large to, okay, we're getting a bit more violent. And now the media wholesale is saying mostly peaceful. And they're quick creating police officers in a precinct and trying to burn it down with them in there alive. And like, how often are you seeing that on CNN? How often do you hear that on NPR? Like these, if you analyze the social trends and see this trajectory going upward, where do you think we're going to end up November 4th? That to me is the part, like, it's going to be peaceful. What? Again, even if Biden wins, I don't think it'll be peaceful on the left side.
No.
But on the right side, you analyze the social trend, you really don't have, other than, the Bundy thing. And that's kind of a different situation. But we don't have the background there. We don't have these right-wing gangs of people with guns intimidating people like that. It doesn't really happen. It's happened as a response to something. You see some biker gangs, but not explicitly right-wing. You have the Proud Boys, who's not like really a right-wing. I mean, they I don't know what they consider themselves, but you don't see that everywhere every day. And you've had Portland 100 days straight of them doing this. You can analyze that social trend. You can analyze social trend from the right, and you don't see it trending upward enough to see this huge violent response. But the other side, we have it already. It's already here. It's been here for a while. Why would you think it'd be any different or even tamped down? What are they going to pack their bags and go home November 4th? This is not going to happen. That's why I'm baffled by people who can say this is going to end peacefully. So
before we go to some thoughts on the left's response, because I have some notes here, and I know we've talked about with some thoughts, I want to do a quick. This is a thing that I thought we'd end up closing with, but I think it's actually really relevant to what you just said. For those who don't know, would you give a brief explanation of Chesterton's fence analogy? And then I want to transition from that to my point about the response on the right.
Say conservatives should get this right? I believe what you're referring to of Chesterton's fence. If you find a fence in the middle of a field and the conservative sees it's there, they're going to ask, well, let's say the liberal sees it's there. They're going to be like, why is this fence here? Let's take it down. Well, the conservative is going to ask, why is it here? I'm not taking it down until I understand its purpose.
Yep. So what does a fence represent?
I mean, a barrier, I guess.
No. In the metaphor, what does a fence represent?
I don't quite remember the metaphor totally, to be honest with you. It's
okay. The fence represents generally, I see it as, I'm not sure if Chesterton ever expanded on that, by the way. So it's not necessarily a fair question, but I see the fence as representing institutions. And his point was that if someone from the left stumbles upon something, that's kind of in an institution, whether it's formal or informal, and they don't know what it is right away. They just want to get rid of it. And a person from the right goes, I'm sure that institution, formal, informal, exists for a reason. Now, if it doesn't have a good reason for existence, then we can get rid of it. But I want to understand it before I say, well, I want to remove it. The reason why I brought up Chesterton's fence is because I had the thought of, kind of where we ended a little bit when we talked Saturday, which is, like you said, people on the right, generally, they will kind of pack up their bags and go home, most of them, unless something shows up on their front door. Like I just said, like they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. The assumption baked into that, both that person and in our description of that event, is they're going because they believe that what they're walking away from is an institution that's probably still going to function, but it might, now that they're going to have a heightened sense of suspicion behind it, because they're going to think that those in charge of the institution stole the power and might, want to come and take their rights and all this other stuff. And what we talked about on Saturday is the point that I said at the end was, what happens, because faith in institutions is so shot, right? Shot to hell. Faith in media, faith in government, all this other stuff. So you're on the right, and you're of the disposition that I'm not going to remove the fence unless I have a good reason to remove the fence. And you don't really have a lot of trust in institutions otherwise. If you're on the right, you're less likely to trust higher education. You're less likely to trust in mainstream media. And the last bastion, government institutions, generally as an institution, not the people. If Biden wins and he gets away with it, I'm saying if he wins and he remains in power, whether or not it's legitimate or not. If you're on the right, there's a good chance that'll be that's your signal that the fence actually does need to be removed. That will be the thing that removes your last shred of hope in institutions. If you go, wait a second, the courts, no one overturned this. Like in other words, what's your hope in anymore after that? And I'm not talking about like your eternal hope, like from a religious standpoint, but I'm saying that by and large, the reason that fence makes sense, or that metaphor makes sense, is because it's ultimately about how you handle things, not necessarily the things in and of themselves. But the scenario doesn't say a conservative stumbles upon a fence and they leave it alone. It just says they make an assessment first before they decide what needs to be done with it. And I could see an argument, I could see a scenario where if enough of them feel like the election was stolen from them, that is the signal that the fence does need to be torn down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'd probably change the metaphor from a conservative standpoint, that I don't think, depending on how broad the institution is, that they would wholesale take down the fence. I think they would see a broken fence and try to repair it. You know what I mean? I don't think, because the center of conservatism is principle, and really what institution do you take down when something doesn't go your way, or you see something get corrupted? If I see something get corrupted, it just seems to me the fence isn't operating properly. I got to fix it up to make it operate properly again.
Yeah, but right? What it looks like to fix it, sometimes it's, this building, it does need fixed up. Okay, I went in, and it'd be cheaper to demolition it. And the other thing is, and this might be a conversation for another time, I'm not sure how much of principled conservatism remains. I think it is largely people who fall into the psychological structure of, I want to be left the hell alone, and I don't, and these guys are insane. You got your big issues, guns and abortion, gay marriage isn't really in the mixture anymore, but it's individual rights, guns, and abortion. Like, I don't want to bake the cake if I don't have to, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not putting a moral judgment on those things, but my point is that none of those principles really map onto the scenario where, because how do you fix the fence? Like, how do you fix the system if those in power stole the power? Like, what is your belief going to be about your capacity? And you will already have seen a failed attempt at fixing it, right? If Trump loses, he will go through the courts. So again, I'm talking about a scenario where Biden remains in power, and by Biden I mean the DNC. But anyway, but where Biden wins and it isn't overturned, and the right perceives as a conviction that it was stolen, and the institutions they thought would right the wrong, the courts, like what happened with Bush v. Gore. Lou Black had a great bit on that back in 2000. He said, Bush v. Gore sounds less like a political campaign and more like a snuff film. Anyway, but the right will look and go, the system worked in 2000. 20 years later, it doesn't work. What's changed? Well, Obama this, the left that, and all this other stuff. Whatever, the swamp, the deep state, pick your thing. It's going to be readily available. You're going to be able to a la carte your answer. But my point is that, I see what you're saying. I'm just not sure. So I'm trying to put myself in the situation where I look at it and I go, okay, the person in power stole the power. The systems that are in place, I'm a big advocate of checks and balances and all this other stuff, or at least I think I am. And the things in place that should have kicked in to fix this didn't, or at least they failed in doing so. And I've been primed to believe that this is radical socialists who want to overturn all my rights. And by the way, they'll have good reason for thinking that, because if they get a supermajority, they will undoubtedly start to pass that crazy legislation that will put fuel on that fire. So my point is that, I understand what you're saying in terms of they will want to fix it, but at some point, a house is no longer a fixer-upper. A car can't be fixed. It's totaled. And I think that would be the thing that it would go from let's fix it to this is not fixable. It's totaled. I do not have hope that it can be fixed, because let me do the opposite. You tell me, Kevin, what hope would they have? So let's say you're in that scenario. The courts rejected it. The media is doing the media thing. And they're already starting to do the things they said they do in the first 100 days. Like Kamala Harris said she would want to do all this gun control stuff, whatever. So it wasn't overturned. And now they're starting to talk about things that sound really scary to me. And my filter for understanding those things, which is going to be, if you're on the right, you're going to be in Tucker, Breitbart, Daily Wire land all day, every day. Because you're going to be like, help me make sense of this. And there's no way they're going to downplay it. That's not a diss on those guys. I'm just saying they're going to be like, this is bad. And so the system didn't work. The people that are filtering your information back to the media on the right will be ratchet, and especially the Fox News crowd will be like, and so you tell me, if you're in that situation, what part of that are you going to look at and go, my glimmer of hope for fixing the system is there? What is that? What is that even? What is that?
So I think the kind of brand of conservatism you described there is more the libertarian conservative. When you talk about especially when you get into more like the grassroots movement stuff, the people who believe in the founding principles, they're not going to react that way. I think them getting the election stolen from them, and it really depends on how it happens. Is it going to be just a failure in the courts? How are they going to see it? Maybe I'm having an issue picturing what does tearing down the fence look like? Does it mean just...
That's a fair question, and I'm not sure I have an answer for that.
Right.
But I would see it as being, so go back to Facebook. So so my mind is just going, and this is all like, and if, so, take this with 1/4 of 1/3 of one, micromolecule of a grain of salt. But so you're going to start to talk in your circles. And where does that largely take place? Facebook. anywhere that conservatives start to talk about this, big tech is going to start to censor. They're going to start to feel censored. So now, I mean, this is an animal being backed into a corner. And then they're going to migrate from the mainstream, like social media sites, to less mainstream. And those are going to turn into right-wing echo chambers, where what happens in an echo chamber? The loudest voices are the ones who get heard. And who's usually the loudest voices? Well, you tell me, who on the left is the loudest voice? Someone like AOC. It's the radicals that their voice is what gets heard. And so I could see a chain of events that, they're pushed off social media. They're migrated into these echo chambers. They already are kind of spread out. And so most of that's going to take place in social media. They're listening to Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham every night, who is going to be feeding that. And that's that reality building, thing. The reality is you're going to be in a place very similar probably to where some Antifa lunatic feels right now. Now, I'm not saying they're going to act in the same way, but I can see a scenario where they feel that same like, oh, it's this, it's fascism. We got to fight the fascists, Antifa LARPing, that it would not take long for someone in that situation, if it played out like that, to get that same sense of urgency that some, moron in Portland LARPing against police officers, fascists, feels right now. So what does it look like to tear it down? Probably similar types of crazy, civil unrest, domestic terrorism kinds of things. And, I hate that I even have to feel like I have to give these kinds of disclaimers. But again, we're not talking about, the bulk of or mainstream, or just assume. How about this? Here's just a lens for people to apply to, post to, to anything that I just said or you've said or going forward, that if I'm talking about, or you're talking about an action that sounds like it'd be taken by a lunatic, assume we're talking about lunatics. Assume we are not talking about sane, rational people. So if you're a sane, rational person and you're hearing this, you're like, I would never do that. Okay, good. Then we're not talking about you. Continue on. I'm only talking about the people who would fall into that group, and it's a subgroup, but how many people are actually burning stuff down in these cities? It's not a lot, but it's enough, right? And so that's who we're talking about. So I'm not talking about every conservative, every person that watches Fox News, any more than I would be talking about on the left. Every mainstream, regularly blue dog Democrat, like the family that I came from, are the ones who are going to be in the streets with guns if Trump wins. So if we're describing the actions of crazy, irrational people, and you're not a crazy, irrational person, none of this applies to you. We're talking about the people that it does apply to. Does that make sense? It feels like a necessary disclaimer, even though it's annoying as hell that it feels necessary to do that.
What I think we're hopefully maybe moving toward, at least in this one, because I think this is a good topic. I don't know. It might take a bit more to unpack, but we are starting to get in the realm of your typical person. So this is what I'd say. Biden wins. It seems sketchy. The immediate reaction of I guess I would say maybe constitutional conservative is expose and grassroots movement. That is what they did with the Tea Party. And it was actually extremely effective in getting people in. Unfortunately, the people who got in weren't as effective as the Tea Partiers wanted them to be. But this is the typical strategy of your constitutional conservatives, is a grassroots movement, because they believe the people still have representation. They can push the power. Now, as the dominoes fall, as you were talking about, as the dominoes fall, as they start passing socialist policy, as they start shutting down free speech via the media, who's effectively going to be the state-run media at that point.
Yeah.
As those dominoes fall, you will see the trend point to where you were going, where especially the constitutional conservative, when you mess with my constitution, there's no difference between messing with my constitution and walking into my house. I'm going to have a gun, and I'm going to be ready to use it. So that is the mentality of the kind of conservative sect that I'm talking about, more so than the libertarian conservatives, which is it's a newer thing. But these are the people who started the Tea Party type movements, a decade ago. So that's what I think the reaction would be. But it would be hard to tell. Again, once those dominoes fall, it's a bunch of what ifs, but they're not out of the realm of possibility. I don't think anything you just described is crazy towns, it makes sense. And it's not unfortunately, not an extremely unlikely scenario if, they run the slate in November.
And one thing I would add, I think what you just said is really important, about grassroots movements. A grassroots movement is a forward-looking, all right, we got to get organized, for the next
election.
Right. For the next election. That is totally dependent on assuming there will be a next election and that the outcome of that will be legitimate, right? So I think that what you said is really important, that even if they feel like it was stolen, if what they don't see are fundamental changes to the system that tells them, well, we're just going to have to make it that much harder for them to steal it next time, you are right. Everything you said is right. Because again, pardon me, I'm allergic to apocalyptic dystopian thoughts about the future. I've been having a lot of allergic reactions lately. That's all I think about.
Some Benadryl. Come on.
Okay. I was out last night. I had to go get some more. Anyway, but so I think that that's fair. But like you said, once the dominoes start to fall, and a lot of it, think about, so I was watching that PragerU video today of that woman. I think I posted about it. It might have only been on Facebook, but of that woman in Australia who was arrested for posting on social media, and she was pregnant. If Biden and them win, that video, it's going to turn into, that's next. That's you if we don't do something, right? And so, I think if there is a belief in, there's that fixing the fence versus just blow the whole thing up. If there is a belief that we can win, we'll just win the next one. Yeah, I think that's fine. But, you get a Supreme Court nomination, you get a few crazy bills put through Congress. And I think that they'll be activated in a way that we don't really know what it'll look like, because the other part of this is that all that unrest is in these cities where there's concentrations of, people who are, inclined to be, the people who went to, the MAGA dudes that went to Portland drove there, right? They weren't Portland residents. And so, that there's something to that. Just, we can talk about all this in the, kind of the philosophical sense and just, theoretical, but there is a practical aspect to pushback from the right, because even in very deeply red states, the cities are still, what were we talking about earlier in Texas? Blue. So, there's a practical aspect to that organization. That's why I have that thought about social media, is they'll start to organize, they'll get censored and all this other stuff and get reported, and then they'll migrate to their echo chambers. And then you're really going to see a radicalizing effect if that takes place, which I think it will, by the way. I do think that social media, I don't even want to talk about what I think the next few months are going to be like for that. But anyway, yeah, so that's the right. So let's transition, if we could, to the left and the game, those on the board on the left. And we've already discussed the media, which is the left. And we've talked about the right-wing media and their role in, radicalizing the right. It's fine. The right, people that would be radicalized, not sane, normal people. But anyway, on the left, I think we did have a really good conversation on Saturday about, where does that go? Where do the people who are burning the stuff down in the cities go? And one of the things that I had talked about, and you brought up earlier before we started this, is this concept of building dragons and, creating, if you go hunting monsters, either you turn into one yourself or you find it, right? You create the monster you're looking for. And so on the left, so we have defund the police. And those of you who have not seen it, on my locals, I just posted a kind of a quick Q&A thing that I did with a friend of mine who's a police officer. And it's a really, it paints a really kind of heartbreaking and depressing image of what's going on with law enforcement right now. So you should go check that out. But so we have calls to defund the police. Their numbers are dwindling. And so you're going to see the police, or the idea of policing, turn into this ineffective, bag of bigotry that they're saying it is, because the only people that are going to apply to be a police officer, they're going to get all the good ones are going to quit. I think it's, 3 or 4, maybe 5 even, police chiefs in major cities that are black have quit in the last couple of weeks because they're like, I am not going to do this anymore.
Well, it's not Black Jobs Matter. It's Black Lives Matter.
Right. That's right. And there's no relationship between the two. And so you're going to make it where the only people that would do that in the first place are, they'll have to lower standards to let people in. And then it's just, who knows? You're probably going to get the type of person who can only get in once you lower the standards. Let's put it that way. And you defund it. So now they're training. It's less funding for training. So they're less quality person and they're less well trained. And so you're going to see an increase in stuff. And so now they're going to, it's kind of like, Bill Burr has that old joke where he's like, whenever you're arguing with your girlfriend or your wife, and their whole goal is to just try and just get you and poke at you until you finally break down and you call them the C word. And then everything that happened before that is irrelevant. It's all of that is justification because of what you just did. And so it's like that, where it's just go and go and go and go and go. And then finally the situation happens where you have bad police and they're underfunded and undertrained. And everything predicated before that, it's like, yeah, that's what we've been saying this whole time. It's like, no, you made that, you mother. And so that'll happen in the cities. And then they'll continue to burn them down. I mean, the fact that Ted Wheeler and these mayors like Lori Lightfoot, how does Bill de Blasio have the approval ratings he has, And this is where that media comes into play. I even wrote that down whenever we were talking about the players on the board. We hadn't really talked about it on the Saturday, but I think that's a good observation. The media is a player on the board. And so they're going to run cover. And that's why, Ted Wheeler and who's the mayor? Eric Garcetti of Los Angeles, and they're portrayed as these, saints in these blue cities. And so, okay, it is what it is. But either way, they're going to create the monster that they thought it was, whether it's through the delegitimizing the police or continuing to burn it down, because the media are going to play cover for the leaders who allow them to continue to burn it down. And the point I'm getting at, and I'll stop here, is so one thing we spoke about earlier is where does it end? So we talked kind of about some of the scenarios on the right. So from the left, so let's go there. You're on the left. You're fighting fascists, whatever. And you think, and here's the other thing with that hope piece, right? The last 4 years has been, there's a Nazi, every single word, all of the words in power. And you're going up to November and you're ratcheting it up. We're burning down the cities. We're heroes. We're just protesters. Like you said, quick creating police in and trying to set the building on fire. And you see this hope in the distance, and that's the election. And it's like, we can just we'll get the Nazi, orange man out of power. And you lose. And now every lens that you have for understanding the situation, for thinking about the situation, for how you feel about the situation is very important, is talking about we're going to have another 4 years of this. And he's made these jokes about, and then after that, we'll negotiate. 'Cause that's what he said last night in Nevada. And it was funny. It was like one of the first lines he said. And I said, yep, I'm sure that'll go well tomorrow, and his stupid lawyer, old ex-lawyer, said, he wasn't kidding. It's like
Roger Stone?
Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah.
No, not Roger Stone.
He came out and said something really stupid recently.
No, today someone said Trump wasn't kidding last night. Anyway, doesn't matter. Anyway, a dumb person said a dumb thing. Either way, you're that person, and you saw the hope. Hope is poison, as Bain would say, because you rip it away. We have another 4 years, and more than that, this proves it. Everything we've said in the last 4 years about how he's an authoritarian and he's going to do whatever to remain in power is true. Look at this. He's still in power, and he didn't actually win. look at all these articles, and they'll do the thing where they smell each other's farts and cite each other about, removing mailboxes or whatever. And they'll say, we told you he was going to steal it. Now, what do? You were going to go that much harder. You didn't even have hope in the first place because you were quick creating people into police officers. And so you're just going to go that much harder. And the other thing is, and I think you asked this the other day, but people stop doing those types of things. So back to those who are benefiting from the status quo and those who, Hoffer says those who aren't, and I would say those who perceive that they aren't. Because we absolutely see people today who are absolutely benefiting from the status quo, or at least could if they chose to, but they perceive that they're not. But either way, so now you have those people. You're going to just go that much harder, and you're going to go that much. And the way that they would leave is if they saw an out. So one, if you have some kind of burnout, maybe, but if you're living in Portland and all of your friends are insane Antifa people, I don't know what burnout looks like for you. It's like, no, yeah, me and Wendy, we've been setting buildings on fire with you for the past 5 years, but actually I got a job at State Farm and I'm going to sell insurance, and Wendy wants to stay at home with our young kid, Simon spelled just with 7 X's, and
non-binary.
It's a baby, and but we're actually going to settle down. We're burned out from it. That's not going to happen. What happens is either you get arrested or you do legitimately have an out, right? You're like, oh, I could be benefiting from the status quo. I could get this job doing this or whatever. Well, how's that going to happen if you're in a city that you've killed the economy, right? So what happens, we can even track this 50 years later from riots like in Detroit, riots in parts of, I think, Chicago and other places that saw riots in the late 60s, early 70s, that the economy has still not come back from those. So you've now created the monster where there is no out for you. There is only utopia. Because there is no job prospects. Your degree is in whatever stupid thing. If you even have one, you probably have a mental illness, and this is what you've been doing. This is where all your social ties are. This is your relationship, and it's where you're finding meaning. You're going to continue to do so. And the broader point is, so those that leave and stop doing that, that's what you'd call attrition. That's losses that your side would take. Conscription is whenever you gain recruits. Every year that there's a graduating class at whatever high school in Portland or Seattle or Chicago or Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles or whatever, and these kids graduate and they're either going to go to college and get radicalized and then join the movement because they got a degree in whatever stupid thing, or they're just going to immediately get radicalized because any parents that remain in Portland are the type of idiot, irresponsible garbage bag that would take their kids to one of these things. And so the kid's going to graduate and then just start doing that thing, right? So I think the conscription will be higher than the attrition every single year that this is allowed to persist until, as Led Zeppelin said, the levee breaks and something happens. So that's where I would see that on the left and where that part kind of goes, and just thinking about trends, just thinking about how does this thing work and what happens if the thing is able to continue to work like it works. That's what I see on the left. I don't know what your thoughts are there. And that's only if, by the way, that's only if Trump wins. If Biden wins, there will still be a group that continues to chop it up, but I think it'll be smaller. But to say that it'll all of a sudden become, again, sunshine and rainbows if Biden wins, no, because what do we see today? Did you see the thing with Colin Kaepernick today?
Oh, yeah. He shot back against the NFL for something, didn't he?
That's just propaganda. It's not enough.
Yeah.
It's never enough because it's never utopia. It's never utopia. So there will be a contingent that will never be satisfied because their standards are such and their schema and their ideology is such that they won't be satisfied. But it will be smaller, I think. I think it will be smaller. I do think that there is a truth to the statement that if Biden wins, the violence will decrease in some form or fashion. That's not to say that it'll decrease relative to future violence as a result of, that. But I think there is some truth to that. So anyway, felt necessary to add, but I'm done now. Sorry, I've been rambling for probably 17 minutes.
You're fine. Real quick aside, actually, I checked it when you said the Trump thing about negotiating a third term. I checked that one Facebook group I'm in of what I would call them now as the Lincoln Project conservatives, because that's exactly where they fit in. But the anti-Trump conservatives, if you can call them that, top 3 articles posted, and these are all moderated posts, so moderators have to accept these, and they don't accept repetitive posts. Top 3 are all headlines saying negotiating third term. And then the 4th one is Roger Stone, who said he should claim martial law. And so it's just these scare tactics, and I just thought it was hilarious. I checked it right when I'm like, I swear they're going to have it, and top 3. They're all freaking out about it. Big deal up over there. But it is true the different levels that places like that groups like Antifa work on, and it kind of we talked about a little bit yesterday as to how they shut down dissent. They can, for the people who have prospects, the people who own businesses in those areas, they use scare tactics to make them conform. But they have to board up their businesses with and hashtag BLM and spray paint that all over there as it was graffitied by someone else. But they do it just to survive, their businesses to survive.
They do because they think they'll survive if they do it.
Right. Yeah. They burn down the businesses anyways, but it's not like the business owner can say, no, I don't agree. It's like, yes, burn it down. I'll make this sacrifice, right? So they're earning support from business owners at the same time having their employees become unemployed. And now their prospects are gone. And what else do? Join the movement. I mean, it's working on 2 levels where, and I agree with you, they're going to keep building their ranks, if you will. And the likelihood that they start losing people in the group, and as we talked about yesterday, again, I only see one scenario where that happens. That is if Trump wins the presidency, and I would say within the first 60 days, he declares Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, which will only help help the media amplify and say he's against people who fight against fascism. But 2, the more important thing is he would have the FBI look into their financial records and stop the cash flow, which I think would be super important. I think Antifa would disappear relatively quickly because no one talks about the financial backing groups like that have, which is another difference between them and on the right wing, where the right wing's not really going to have that financial backing. Once they go to jail, it's going to be tough to get out. There's not going to be any of these funds to bail them out.
They do crowdfund. They do crowdfund a lot of their
stuff. Crowdfund, but who's the gatekeepers of the crowdfunding? That one guy in Kenosha, I forgot his name, Kyle Rittenhouse. They shut down his crowdfunding thing immediately. They shut it down like day one. I don't know if someone else put it up, and I'm sure they have other sources to crowdfund. But then they kept the crowdfunding up for Jacob Blake. He's like a millionaire now with how much crowdfunding he got. And they shut down Kyle Rittenhouse like day one, I thought. And like, again, fact check me to make sure I'm accurate, but that's what I heard happened immediately.
Don't tell me those things.
So you got to remember, we have the systems to do it, but there are gatekeepers to those systems. And if those gatekeepers are going to be forced, because who knows these crowdfunding sites, what their political leanings are, but you know where the power lies? Like, who can take these people out by saying they're racist because they're allowing Nazis to crowdfund on their sites? I mean, that's the influence to get these guys pointing in the right direction. And we've had previous discussions like this before, but this is working on a lot of different levels. And unfortunately, none of them are optimistic. But going along with what you said, I mean, the ranks are going to keep growing. And when we think, and I don't know if we want to even cover this, but like, what's the good scenario here? Like, what can happen that ends in peace and not mass destruction? I can think of one: Joe Jorgensen wins and we all get high. I think that's about it. And, I doubt that'll happen. But really, like, where do you see this going? If Trump or Biden wins, I could see Biden winning and there not being explicit violence, but there will certainly the imaginary dragon in your mind is going to start becoming real. Huh. And they've been asking for it. And they use it kind of like you said to validate their previous claims. There's all these white supremacists, and then once one guy like Kyle Rittenhouse comes out there and shoots some people with no history of white supremacy on social media or advocating for stuff like that,
MAGA is white supremacy to these morons, right? Though you know that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we see it in the NFL games that they talk about. we're allowing you to put people's names on your helmet so you can stand up for these people. And it's like, okay, if I'm an NFL player, can I put David Dorn on my helmet? Do you think that would fly? You think that would be approved? I mean, again, black guy died doing something admirable. Like, no one's going to shoot down David Dorn, but can I put him on my helmet? Or does that not fit in with the narrative? Black lives matter
phrasing?
as long as they're the right black lives, and Black Lives Matter, right? Yeah. But again, it's really fascism at its basis level that you're allowed to do anything you want. You're allowed to stand up for what you want unless it's the wrong thing, and then you're no longer allowed to.
You're allowed to you have the freedom to pursue all of the approved things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I left a comment on so what's his stupid idiot Don Lemon. Silence is not an option. He did an interview with someone talking about that, and he was like, "Get out there, have your voices heard," da, da, da. And he kept going, and he said, and there was a statement that he made about if you support these things, get out there, da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay, so the podcast is silence is not an option. So you can only so you have to speak, but the only thing you can speak is if you support these pre-approved things. Yeah, that's dystopian, and I hate you. But yeah, that's like you were talking about with the NFL and putting would they put David Dorn? Probably not. Now, one thing I will say, and I have to give some props to my homies, Pat Mahomes. He said it takes all of us, and they did try to emphasize unity, and I think that that's a good thing. So I don't want to crap over all of it.
So I saw that.
If you have Jacob Blake or Michael Brown or any of them on your football helmet, I almost made a CTE joke, but I didn't make a CTE joke, but I almost made a
We're already not going to be monetized on YouTube for several reasons.
We already are not going to be monetized, even though I did not make a CTE joke about the type of people that would put Jacob Blake or Michael Brown on their helmet. So I didn't make that CTE joke.
Who would remember? That's fine.
That's actually really good. Anyway, go
on. So those phrases that they had on there, and I know we're kind of going on a tangent here, they're all pre-approved. There's Black Lives Matter. It's what did Mahomes have on his helmet?
It takes all of us.
So I like the idea, and people like Mahomes, like, they're coming from a good place. I don't think they're part of this BS.
I think Mahomes is trying his damnedest to give as little as he has to it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He also seems to not be fully in it, but he seems obligated is how I'd say it. It takes all of us. I think that is an Orwellian phrase, because wink, wink, nod, nod, it takes all of us unless you're not with us, and then we're going to exclude you. Like, how can a player on that team say it takes all of us, but maybe I don't agree with the narrative, so maybe I don't want to partake in whatever social justice movements you're trying to push because I think it's based on false evidence or just bad narrative. Okay, well, they're like, well, it takes all of us except for you because you're not trying, you don't believe in the narrative, you're not included in the all of us part. So that's why that phrase bothers me a bit.
To do what is that Orwellian part? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I'm not hating on your boy, but like it's the phrasing that it's like, again, they had pre-approved phrases you could put on there, which I guess like, you can
Hong Kong?
Really, really, yeah. We should do it. Yes, absolutely.
NBA.
Right.
So even within that, I would say he picked the least offensive of any of them. Mm-hmm. Right. So,
and he means it. And I think he truly means it. So,
I think he does too.
There's a bit of difference.
I will say it's clear that they're adapting to the landscape with what they're doing. And I think they're adapting in the right direction. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I think they're adapting in the right direction. So to your point a second, I mean 11 minutes, about where does this end up and, kind of reining it in, let's draw it to a little bit of a close. Because you said, what's the good scenario, right? What's the What's the positive scenario? So there isn't one. There isn't one in terms of November because the groundwork for the inevitable violence has taken years to lay. And this is the point I've made with academia and with all this stuff with far left orthodoxy, that, just because it's spilling up to the surface right now, people who are like, well, how do we fight? If only we this. And I'm like, no. This is like 70 years in the making. If you think you're going to fix it in 6 months, you're an idiot. So stop. So, there is no peaceful scenario in November. There are scenarios where we mitigate and learn, I guess, a little bit from some of these mistakes. But what I will say is this. So the thing can I say the really apocalypse, it's a good news, bad news situation. I'm going to give you the bad news first. Can I do that? Is that all right?
You may. Yes.
This is what I'll say. Because I finished this bottle of Evan, and so you probably got to close us out. The bad news is, again, we talked about this on Saturday, but we didn't record it. So no one knows what I'm about to say, except for you. Look at what happened, what has been happening since George Floyd. Okay. And you can look it up, find lots of I'm not being sarcastic, like very intelligent people that I think you should be listening to, like Douglas Murray or Rubin or Eric Weinstein or Brett Weinstein or Heather Heying or James Lindsay, any of these people who will, I think, accurately point out that the lockdowns from COVID were part of the priming mechanism for when George Floyd happened, why we've seen, and when was George Floyd? April, I think it was April.
Yeah.
5 months, right? About 5 months of chaos in a lot of our cities. I'm glad you're looking it up.
Mm-hmm.
But however long it's been, so lockdowns up to that point were probably at most 8 weeks. I think it's probably closer to 6. What'd you find?
May 25th.
May 25th. Very close. Close to June. I was really close. Samsonite. So either way, I was wondering, in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's been 100 days of protest in Portland. So there's no way that Jacob Blake was that much more than 100 days ago. So May 25th. So May to June, June to July, July to August, August, September, right? So we're looking at 3.5 months of violence coming at the tail end of, when were the major lockdowns started? What, mid-March, end of March?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
March to April to May. So all of this is relevant. Okay, so reset. We had 2 months of lockdowns to varying degrees in different states. And I would argue that, people being driven online on the social media and everything from the last 3.5 years contributed to this. But you have a priming, right? You have a priming. George Floyd. And George Floyd wasn't just George Floyd, right? It was Ahmaud Arbery, right? And then who was the guy in Central Park?
Atlanta.
No.
The bird watching?
Rayshard Brooks was after George Floyd, the bird watching guy. Either way, you have Arbery, bird watching, George Floyd in a short time period. And with the lockdowns, you have this priming, this kind of pressurizing. Really, and the metaphor is really good because people they're indoors, they're forced inside, pressurizing. George Floyd explosion. Last 100 days has been chaos in a lot of cities. Some of them different stages. Kenosha different than Atlanta, different than Washington D.C., different than Portland. But either way. Right? So it took 2 months of lockdowns and social media and all this other stuff to prime for the event of George Floyd and the outcome of violence. Think about the event of a perceived illegitimate election in November and 4 years of priming that the other side, if they win, it's because they stole it, and also they're your enemy, and also they're evil, and also they're coming to take everything you love and care about. So really, you can look at those 2 months leading up to George Floyd and extrapolate that out in some form or fashion, and you get the last 4 years. And in November, we're going to have a George Floyd type incident. One side's going to win and one side's going to lose. What happened after George Floyd died? What have we been looking at? So anyone who thinks that it can't get worse or it won't get worse is lying or crazy, and either of those categories you shouldn't listen to. It will get worse. It will get worse because that was not a release. The last few months have not been a release. So that's the bad news. The bad news is, like we said at the beginning, you just assume there's going to be violence. Okay. Now, here's the good news. Here's the good news. And it's not really news. This is the good path. But the good path is to reject tribalism, to reject the ad hominem, to reject the idea that everyone on the other side is your enemy. And that's what we said the other day, right? Like you were just saying, like you just said, the minute you start to do this, you're at the kids' table and you don't get to be part of the conversation. That's not a suppression of speech. It's saying, la, 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 I'm not listening to you because you are making things worse. You go over there. You and all the other people who want to make things worse can go over there and make things worse together. Make mud pies. That's fine. The adults are going to come over here and we're going to talk to each other and find ways to, not make things worse and fix everything that you started. And it's not just the media. The media increasingly to me are the ones who I'm like, okay, we have to change the media model. We have to make it to where when Rachel Maddow says the crazy stuff she says, that viewers turn it off and say, no, I don't want to hear that because my neighbors aren't my enemy. My neighbors are just people. And if you say they're my enemy, then you are making things worse and I'm going to shut it off. And if I hear Tucker Carlson say that the only reason they would do this is because they want to take your rights away. They want to take your way of life away and end it. And because they hate you. And there's no other logical explanation other than that they hate you. Like the people who would hear that go, no, Tucker, they don't hate me. I'm sure there are some people that hate me, but you said they, and you're talking about the left. No, they don't hate me. I'm shutting you off. And so the good path is for everyday citizens to tune out and actively say no to anyone that adds fuel to the fire of tribalism and of this partisan, zero sum. If you win, I lost. And if I win, you lost. And you're my existential threat and I'm your existential threat, and words are meaningless because we've been ramped up to 11 for however long. Anyone that adds to that, you can be gracious and say, dude, do you realize how counterproductive that is? Do you realize what you're saying? Okay. And if they go, you know what, I can see what you're saying. That's fine. Let's have a conversation. Let's not demonize everyone. Okay, cool. But if they say, no, they really do want to do that. There's nothing you can say that'll change my mind. They are my enemy. Then, like you said, they're at the kids' table. They're not part of this because they're the reason why we're in this situation. To a degree, a thought I just had, I remember a good buddy of mine back in 2008 put a John McCain sign in his yard. And I was, we were able to get some extra credit. But I believed in it, was kind of campaigning on behalf of Barack Obama in 2008. And I was ridiculing him. I didn't know anything about John McCain. I just knew he was a Republican. So that means he was bad, right? Mm-hmm. Me in 2008 was part of the problem. So me in 2008, someone can say, you're part of the problem. You don't get to be part of this conversation because you're an asshole. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not part of this. And so I think that we have to be able to be gracious with people, but also be principled enough. And this is that good path part. So the bad news is it's going to happen. The good news is there is a way out. And the way out is for us to reject the idea that everyone that disagrees with us is the enemy, that they're trying to murder us. Most people, this is the one good thing CNN did over the past few years is they took this phrase and they did nothing with it. But there is an exhausted majority. There are people who just want to live their lives, and they know that the other side isn't the enemy. And so those are the people those are the ones who are going to find a way out of this crap that was created by those who bought into the idea that the other side is a bad guy. And so the good way forward, the good news is we can get out of this if the people driving the conversation are willing to be so principled that it hurts, piss off people on their own side by putting them into timeout. You put your kid in timeout. It's not that I don't put you in timeout because I hate you. I put you in timeout because you're doing harm. And so you're going to get to leave timeout. You're not going to spend forever in timeout, but you're doing harm right now. And so you need to be in timeout. We're going to undo the harm. You can leave timeout. And then we'll assess the situation going forward. But it's going to take people on either side going, no, you've done enough damage by sharing all these memes about how evil the other side is. You can talk about the ideas, and absolutely you can talk about people that have made it very clear that they're not interested in anything other than the exact opposite, but of equal damage to what you're sharing. That's fine. But either way, you can't say because this policy proposal was made by this person, every person who votes D or votes R is also, evil or whatever. So That's my good news, bad news. Bad news is we've had 4 years worth of lockdowns and we're about to have a George Floyd in November. So the powder keg is ready to go, and it will go. We've talked about all the ways in which it could go. And there's a whole lot of ways we talked about that, or there's a whole lot of ways that it could go that we haven't talked about. So like I said, it's not exhaustive, whatever, deal with it to the people watching. But there is a good way out of it. And the way out of it is we have to reject the tribalism. We have to be virulently principled in terms of our allies are those who go, I'll end it here. I promise. I promise. Watch this. It's the first time when I say I'll end it here, I actually do it. This is not an original thought. Haidt and Lukianoff put this in the Coddling the American Mind. And they quote the civil rights activist Pauli Murray. She says, whenever those who seek to exclude me draw a circle around themselves, excluding me, I draw a larger circle around my brothers to include them. So where I'll leave it is a lot of this boils down to the circles we draw. We are Americans. We are beneficiaries of a beautiful, not perfect, but the best damn one so far, ideology and doctrine to establish a country. And we're neighbors. And this is going to come down to the circles we draw and the circles we allow to be drawn and the circles we validate and invalidate. If you're part of the group that has looked at the circle that said, unless you adhere to every single piece of this checklist, you're my enemy, that's a bad circle. So what's going to come down to is the people that draw the circles around and find ways to build bridges, not burn them down, with those on the other side who are just as exhausted as they are, who are just as ready to be past this partisanship, this tribalism, and this vitriol, and this divisiveness as they are. So it's going to come down to those who are willing to draw the bigger circles. And that's not to say that you sacrifice principle. You can have disagreements, but it's how do you have them? And can you have a beer afterwards, or are you ready to draw your gun afterwards? Those are different things. And so where this goes, the good path forward it's ultimately going to fall on if the people who are willing to draw the bigger circles of establishing common humanity with people as opposed to enmity with people, if they're willing to step up and do that and lead the conversation and not let those who are drawing the small circles lead the conversation anymore, then we can get past this. If not, then we're toast. But it's going to come down to who's drawing the circles and how big they're drawing them. And that's it. That's all I got. Well, holy crap. I can't believe you let me go that long. I'm done. I really am.
That rant you went on was great. I mean, you really encompassed a great way to really end this conversation. I'll mention something very small on the apocalyptic outcome, because I think this has been apocalyptic of a podcast enough, and I don't want to keep adding to it. But you know, you're talking about these different primers, and you're using the Michael Floyd one, I think, very responsibly in saying that you've had these. What was it? George Floyd? Yeah. Did I say Michael Floyd? No, not the ex-football player. The George Floyd, the guy who unfortunately died in Minnesota. Yeah, all the things that happened after that, and now we have the COVID primer, and we have find people on all sides primer. We have every spin the media is putting on it, and I know I'm really going for left-wing things rather than going for right-wing things, but I think both, whatever's setting the narrative is what's going to be priming in this.
Russia,
and then what you're saying,
Russia,
right, but no China and Iran, which is still amazing to me. But what you're saying is going to be some sort of catalyzing event that would happen. Either the election is that event, or something happens shortly after.
The results of the election are that event for one group of people.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, the fact that we're going to relate this an election to someone unfortunately dying is crazy, but we are that far. To say we're not that far, I would say people are going to think this is much bigger than George Floyd. So, you know, people are going to think of it as a legitimate catalyzing event, and to see, again, with all the primers that are leading up to it, it's just too hard to see it not ending in a way that's not going to end in more violence and destruction. But as you said, there is a good path, and the hard part of the path is going to be calling people out and handling it with grace. It's going to be a difficult part, because I'm thinking about it this way. You send them to the kids' table is going to get super crowded. There's a good SNL skit that I've rewatched recently with Will Ferrell, where he's flipping burgers in the backyard, invites some people over, and he's just having a nice day. The kids on the shed. And it's like, who's going to be the adult in the room, and who is going to be able to use the adult voice? At what point do you start saying the kid, when does my hand meet your nice word for butt? And then when do you start taking off the belt and showing a little bit of force? Like obviously you don't do these things literally, but it's like, we need to make it clear who the adults in the room are. That's the important part. And that's the hard part. Because right now we think of Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo as adults. We shouldn't be thinking in a society with any sort of intellectual competence. You wouldn't say that, right? And someone is going to have to come up, and normally it's going to be helpful if it comes from the left, to say, these are the kids. Let's put them at the kids' table. When they're ready to play like adults, we'll bring them back. But for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the union, we have to do something that's going to bring us together. We don't have to agree on everything. We don't have to say we're going to agree on all these different policies, but we have to agree that this is one nation. This is not two different sides fighting with each other, or it will end up like the Civil War.
There's a buddy of mine, briefly, I said I was done. I lied. Sorry. There's a buddy of mine who brought up a really good metaphor. I'd love to talk to him further about this. And he's one of who's really on the left, pretty far on the left, who is a mutual Bernie supporter like I was in 2016. And we had a fantastic conversation a couple months ago. It was one of the most encouraging things ever. And I talked about the marketplace of ideas, and he said, yeah, but that only works if it's a real marketplace, if it's a real free market. It doesn't work if there's some monopoly or some other thing there influencing the market. And when you were just talking about Robin DiAngelo and Ibram Kendi, their ideas are in the marketplace of ideas, but they're operating it like, thugs who are making you buy their product, or else there's a threat if you don't do it. So there is a coercive aspect to it. And I thought that was a really good way of him, putting it. We do talk a lot about the marketplace of ideas, but the assumption there is that it's a free market, and not that there are perverse incentives or coercion or these other things that meddle in a market, that makes it to where ideas that are so transparently bad can become successful in the market, like DiAngelo or Kendi. Those do not become successful in a regular market where the best ideas rise to the top and the bad ideas, go bankrupt, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an issue there as well. And I think that it's worth pointing out that something is effed up with the marketplace of ideas right now, because the marketplace is having some issues, and it's not totally a free market, or else DiAngelo would not be synonymous with good idea. Yeah. Kendi would not be synonymous.
Not a free market at all. I would argue you're not even close to a free market.
Right. But I'm just saying we don't think about it like that, right? So Anyway,
to me, it's like you're in a dollar store, and my ideas should be valued probably like $10, but there's a bunch of these $1 items that are being sold there, and there is no section for these actual good ideas that take more thought.
Right. They're still in the truck and it hasn't even been unloaded yet.
Right. Or it's not even unloading again. You're in the dollar store. This is all you're going to get is $1 ideas. The simplest, most fun looking things are going to win.
Yep.
But when you don't allow the $10 ideas in the store, you're not even shopping in a free market. You're shopping. I mean, you're in a free market within the subgroup of that store, but the analogy holds that they're not even allowed in it because it's not their brand.
Yep.
It's not the brand that they're trying to portray. It's not the narrative they're trying to portray. So they're going to do these very simple ideas that sound really good on the surface, but are absolutely garbage. And I mean, I had to research, and we probably really should end it soon, but I do some research on one of Kendi's latest chapters on what I'm doing. And I had to read an old article of his from 2016 about the party of Lincoln. Yes, it's very racist or something like that. He had to explain how Abraham Lincoln is very racist and we shouldn't think of him as a great emancipator. But his thing, it goes against his very own logic to say he actually didn't want to free the slaves, but he did it to save the Union, which to me is like, by his definition of racism, which just means, does it end in equity or inequity? I'm like, well, by your own logic, what he did was not racist. It was anti-racist because it ended in more equity for black people. So his intention is completely irrelevant. Right.
Yeah.
So you drop it there, or maybe in 2016, he didn't develop the anti-racist idea that he has now.
Highly evolved.
Yeah. But it's the thing, like, what are you willing to do to save the Union? Or is that even what you want to do? Do you want to save the Union, or do you want to deconstruct it and create your own?
If you think it's
one side wants to save it, and I think a lot of the left wants to save it too.
I do too.
It's the crazies. It's the crazies running the show there, and it's extremely unfortunate because we need a healthy liberal base in order to maintain a healthy country in general. And you can't have the right wing keep absorbing all these different ideologies. It's just not healthy.
That's a whole nother conversation, but what you're saying there is actually really deep. That last part of what the right wing is absorbing. I had a really great, when you're saying not everyone on the left, great conversation with someone I deeply respect, who's on the left the other day. And they were openly acknowledging, like, I had the realization the other day, if all someone did was listen to CNN, or all someone did was listen to Fox News, they would become radicalized on either the far left or the far right. And they use CNN. And this is someone who is an old school liberal, really an old school liberal. And so, I mean, what you just said is so right, so correct, that there are people on the left and people on the right that, what's that exhaustive majority that they want to be done with this. They don't want the lunatics driving the conversation. And they really want a way forward, but also those people are those who are probably benefiting from the status quo and who are just keeping their head down, right? 63% of Americans censor themselves, censor their political views because they're afraid of backlash. That's a huge, I mean, the percentages I've been operating on are 30 on the far left, 30 on the far right. They think the other 30 is their enemy. Well, they think the other 70 is their enemy, but really the only part that reciprocates that is 30. But really, if you look at that statistic, that 63% that are self-censoring leaves 37. So even round it down to 60 and 40. Those who exist in an echo chamber are about 20 and 20. So you have a pretty clear, so even if my 30% is off, well, it's only off by about 33%. You're looking at about 20% on the far left and the far right that probably believe some of these insane ideas. Okay, that's fine. That's 20%. So if you're the other 80% on the right, you take that 20%, and what'd you say? You put them at the kiddie table and say, you're not part of this anymore because you are part of the problem. What's that in Die Hard, the first Die Hard? If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, quit being part of the problem, put the other guy back on the line. And if you're on the left, you look at the other, in the 80% that's like, you guys suck. You take that 20% and go, no, you're going to the kids' table. You guys can make mud pies and LARP against fascists over there. We're going to drive the conversation now because we don't think those guys are the enemy. We don't think Rachel Maddow is our priest who's telling us, what to believe. But it's incumbent on whichever part of that group you're in to step up and do something. That's what we said at the end of our hierarchy conversation, right? You do need to speak out at this point because it's moving. The wheels are in motion. It's happening either way. And the only way to stop it from happening is if those who oppose it actually oppose it. You can't just oppose it in the back of your mind. Well, it'd be kind of nice. Kind of nice if you guys didn't do that. But, no, you have to actually oppose it definitionally. Be in opposition to that insanity and get those kids to go sit at the kids' table. So,
absolutely. Yeah, that's all I got. I think we can hopefully come up with some better solutions, some brighter ideas. Maybe we can swing back to this topic if we ever hear someone being like, no, there is a way this ends up being pretty good. Maybe it gets there. To be clear about all this, this isn't stuff we hope is going to happen. This is stuff we absolutely dread is going to happen. And it's good to say this now so maybe we can course correct before the worst case scenarios begin. And it's probably already too late, but what can you do? What can you do to try to get us on the good path, as you say it? We got to try now. It's going to be too late. If we start to sing Kumbaya together on November 4th, it's not going to work. You got to start soon. You got to start now.
If we do that and it does work, I will assume that I'm dead or in a simulation or something like that. I had a thought, but I forgot what it was. So it doesn't matter. This is good. Oh no, you said this isn't what we hope. No, it's not what we hope. It's if I all of a sudden at the last minute see that there's a vehicle in the wrong lane going the wrong direction on the highway going 80 miles an hour towards me, I certainly don't hope that they're going to hit me. I hope the opposite. My hope is not really that relevant in terms of the reality of that situation. So we do hope that things are different, but we're just assessing reality as we see it. And again, yes, Breitbart was right. Politics is downstream from culture. Zacharias was right. Politicians don't create culture. Culture creates politicians. I would add the media class. So all of the things we don't like, the institutions in our government, the institutions in our media that we don't like are reflections of where we're at as a culture. And so if we wanted to change, we have to change. As a group of people, we have to be the change that we want to see. in the world.
And scene. Nice.
Right. And I mock it, but it's so true. It is really true. So we'll leave it there. That's kind of our thoughts on the election is one thing. And one thing that Kevin said before this, and you didn't mention it, but I did just think about it. I don't know how I remembered it, is that it's important to note it's really not as the most important thing isn't who wins the election. Like what you said before we started, I'm not as concerned with who wins or their perspectives on it as I am with the absolute certainty of violence as a result of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm concerned about the politics side of it, but yes, I'm not as interested.
We both are.
What Biden and Trump say is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's what the people see.
Right. And so that's where we're at. It's about the reality of no matter who wins, we all lose kind of thing. All right, guys? No matter who wins, we all lose unless we care enough about it to do something different and let the adults take control of the conversation, like Kevin said. So that's it. We could do some more conversations about some other stuff. I'm sure there's lots of things we talked about that we could do that I'm not remembering right now because I drank half a bottle of whiskey during this conversation, which probably wasn't enough in terms of thinking about what we're looking at going into November. But anyway, so if this kind of thing you're into, please, I made a lot of claims about conservatives, conservatism, all this other stuff. It's still something that's pretty foreign to me. One thing I realized is I used to think it was a good thing that I don't have a freaking clue whenever I'm hearing Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro talk about Drudge Report on the Sunday special today. I'm like, what does a Drudge Report have to do with anything? Well, actually, that matters to conservatives. I just don't consume any conservative sources. I thought it was a good thing to say, yeah, I don't watch Fox News. I'm not sure it's a good thing anymore because I do need to have a better understanding of the information those people are getting. I thought that just watching, New York Times or, reading New York Times or NPR and CNN and stuff was a good thing. My point is that I don't know a damn thing about what the average conservative thinks or feels right now. But Kevin really does. And it's not just conservatives. He's talking about principles and ideas of conservatism. And so I would strongly encourage you to go and check out Kevin's locals at engineeringpolitics.locals.com. He's on Twitter at ENG_politics. He's on YouTube, Engineering Politics. You might be able to predict the next thing I'm going to say, but he's also on ThinkSpot, and that's Engineering Politics, and Parler and all these other places. He has his own website, engineeringpolitics.com, that you can go check out. And so my point is if you're like me and you kind of have these, brushes with what, people who are diehard conservatives and understand the principles behind it. And I'm not talking about Republicans, but the conservative ethos, I need people like Kevin to help me understand the way a regular traditional conservative might think about these things. And also just the ideas. There's some good ideas there. I mean, man, John Haidt talked about when he wrote The Righteous Mind, he wanted to help Democrats win elections. And after he wrote The Righteous Mind and he was reading conservatives, he said, you know what, actually, I'm now a centrist because there are some good ideas over here. I just was never exposed to them. And so go and check out Kevin. He is the type of person that is synthesizing these ideas. He engages with them honestly. So please go and support him at all those other places. Kevin, did I leave anything out?
No, I think another just important thing to mention, and it kind of goes along with the theme that neither of us want this stuff to happen. Douglas Murray always talks about how, I forgot what he kind of started out writing, but he says, I'm writing about these other things because I feel like I have to, but I really want to go back to writing about my original content that I care about. Like I'm a bit there. Like I started out by writing about economics and conservative principles. I would love to go back to writing about it, but this stuff can't just go untalked about.
Yep.
This stuff needs to be talked about. This stuff needs to be exposed for what it is. And as much as it's nice to have all this extra thing of content, and I get to show a different burning city every other week, and it helps me make content. It's not something I enjoy doing. I would really rather have us elect a president, get over it, so I can go back to talking about economics and founding principles. As boring as it sounds, but I'm not interested in continuing doing this. So I sincerely hope we can head in the right direction. I hope what you and I are doing together can help that. So just make sure everyone to check out Truman at returntoreason.locals.com, My Mundane Mind on Twitter, also Return to Reason on ThinkSpot, and no Parler yet, right?
I do have Parler, but I don't use it. And what I left up for both of us is YouTube. We're both on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you're not subscribed to Kevin's YouTube, then that's a mistake. So sub to Kevin's YouTube, obviously Engineering Politics, mine's Return to Reason. Either way, guys, it's going to take all of us, to kind of play off of Mahomes when he put it on the back of his helmet, the pre-approved phrase. And I think Kevin's right. That is a little bit Orwellian. In that context. But if you hear anything we said, and even just at the beginning, we said, close your eyes, what's the peaceful scenario? If you didn't take issue with us just putting it out there that people will die as a result of the presidential election. I hear myself say that. I'm like, that's hyperbole. I hate that. That sounds horrible. But I can't find the flaw. There's that GIF. It's like no lies detected. I can't find the flaw. I can't.
And you're not saying if Trump gets elected or if Biden gets elected. It's general madness.
Doesn't matter.
That's the problem. We're not advocating for one or the other, although I could certainly advocate for one or the other. But this isn't you saying vote for this guy or we're all going to die. This is like we need to change our behavior.
And that's the problem.
Bad things will happen.
That no matter who wins, that you hear that and we can say it and you hear it and go, yeah, no matter who wins, there will be people that died because of what the final results are from the election, the presidential election in November of 2020 or whenever it is, TBD, as Kevin said. If you hear that and you go, holy crap, what happened to us to make that sound like a normal proposition? Then you're in the same boat as us. And it takes all of us to fight that and put the kids back at the kids' table and us reasonable people who are like, let's draw some big circles, build some bridges instead of burning them down and move past this crap. That's where we're at. You're on our side. That's it. Kevin, you got anything else?
That's it. Beautifully put.
All right. I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much for watching, and we're going to keep this conversation going. I always love these conversations with Kevin. It's a real privilege to be able to talk about this stuff. And so I'm excited for, how this progresses as it continues on, even if part of that progression is us both mutually stocking up on firearms and medicine and food stores, because that also seems reasonable, as effing insane as that sounds. So anyway, all right, that's it, guys. And from both Kevin and I think I speak for both of us when I say go Chiefs. All right, you guys have a good one.
How about Chiefs Packers Super Bowl 2021? How about that?
I would watch that. I'd watch it. Anyway,
nice.
All right. Peace.
All right, there it is. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Make sure to join the Return to Reason Locals community and show Truman some support. You can go to returntoreason.locals.com to support his locals community, and you can also find him on ThinkSpot and YouTube by searching Return to Reason. And you can also find him on Twitter at MyMundaneMind. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I want to take a quick moment to share different ways you can help support this content. There are a few easy ways to do this. You can follow me on Twitter at ENG_politics. You can give me a follow on Parler at Engineering Politics. You can join the Facebook group named Engineering Politics, where I share and discuss content with the Facebook community. You can also subscribe to my video channel on YouTube under the channel name Engineering Politics, where you can find the video version of each podcast. I'm also active on ThinkSpot, which is a discourse-generating application that promotes intelligent and honest conversations while discouraging the trolling and nonsense found on most social media platforms. You can find all of my podcasts and videos on there as well. But the best way to interact with me, get the newest content, and support this podcast is the Engineering Politics Locals community. This is an amazing community that goes far beyond just a membership platform intermediary for creators. It allows followers of this content to get together and discuss the newest articles, podcasts, and videos all in one place. I strongly urge you to join the Engineering Politics Locals community at engineeringpolitics.locals.com. You can become a member for free, and now you can get a 3-month free trial when becoming a subscriber if you use promo code EPFREE. That's spelled EPFREE, no spaces. I would love to have your support with your subscription so this content can remain independent and keep growing. Monthly subscriptions to the Engineering Politics Locals community start as low as $2 per month. So I hope I can count on your support so I can start making higher quality podcasts and subscriber content like the bonus content at the end of most shows, and the new video series, the EP Zone, available only in the Engineering Politics Locals community with a subscription pass. I appreciate your consideration. Let's build a community together. Thanks for listening. This is the Engineering Politics Podcast. None of the persons, podcasts, books, or other references other than engineering politics used in this work directly reflect my ideas and or personal beliefs, nor should they be held accountable for anything said during this podcast. Thank you for listening.